Politicians get little sympathy from the public for the flack and derision they encounter as part of their daily grind. We figure it comes with the territory. But not all of it is fair, and that's especially true when the politician in question gets the gears, or much worse, because she's a woman. Joining us now for their take on sexism and elective office, Olivia Chow, former Member of Parliament and Toronto mayoral candidate in 2014. Janet Ecker, former Member of Provincial Parliament, whose cabinet posts included finance and education, and Karen Stintz, former Toronto City Councillor and Chair of the Toronto Transit Commission, and also a one-time candidate for mayor in Ontario's capital city. Lovely to have you all here at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels of experience. We have it all covered. And I want to start in a bit of an odd spot. Okay, Olivia Chow, you first. Do you remember what you were thinking on November 8th, 2016, as you watched the returns come in from south of the border? And that's what you were thinking.
Sorry, I know I should verbalize it somewhat, but you know, it was a primal scream. I actually lost a big bet because I kept faith. I believed in the poll number. So when Florida went down, I thought, it was Ohio. Ohio went down. I thought, Michigan, come on, Michigan can do this. Okay. And so I stayed up late, and then...
Did you stay up right to the end?
I did.
3 o'clock in the morning?
Bitter end. And the next morning, I had a huge hangover, not because of alcohol. I wore black for several days in a row.
Because Hillary lost?
Because Hillary lost.
What did you think about the fact that Hillary Clinton lost?
Well, I think the English language ran out of expletives, deleted, and superlatives to describe what everybody thought that night.
And you're a conservative.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you didn't like the Republican candidate winning.
Well, I thought both candidates were so flawed. I mean, that was one of the problems. I mean, Hillary, I had great admiration and respect for a lot of what she'd done. I probably would have voted for her if I'd been there. Certainly would not have voted for Trump. It was appalling. It is of concern to, when a politician opens up that Pandora's box that he has done, not just on male-female, but on every issue, it's very difficult to put it back in. And I really worry about the United States. I worry about what it means for politics around the world and democracies.
Did you watch?
I did. Although I won $50 that night.
You bet on Trump?
I bet on Trump. Wow. I did. Mind you, I did it in May. So even by August, I thought I might have lost my bet. But having lived during the time where we had an administration that was somewhat challenged and troubled,
What would that be a reference to?
The Ford years. And I saw how people, when they made their decision to vote for Rob, it didn't matter what the media said, it didn't matter what he said. It didn't matter what the belief around him was. People were committed and loyal to Rob Ford. And in Donald Trump, the same thing happened. People decided they were going to vote for change. And everything that got piled on to Donald Trump just became noise, because they had already decided they didn't want 8 more years of what the government was. And I have family down in Baltimore that had voted for Obama on 2 occasions and just said, we couldn't have 8 more years.
So Obama voting family voted Trump?
They voted Trump. Mm-hmm. They just tuned it out. They tuned out because the establishment then became the media. And they were voting against the establishment, and that included the poll numbers, and they tuned him out and said, okay, well, that's just outrageous, but he won't really be that outrageous if he gets in.
Which has actually come to pass.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
So the verdict is out.
The verdict is fair enough.
There's no question. There's no question. He's
early.
Erratic. He is. He's a lot of things that I think people are still. But he knows that, and so he's got to be very cautious if he's going to be taken seriously now.
Olivia Chow, I want to just sort of follow up on whether you felt bad about the fact that the more progressive candidate lost, or you felt bad about the fact that in your lifetime the possibility of seeing a woman president now was not going to happen.
It was the second.
The latter.
But partially also she's progressive, much more so than Donald Trump. It's so exciting to imagine finally having a female president just south of our border. So for a long time, I was saying, okay, this is going to happen, the poll number is high. And so it was a huge disappointment, partially because it's time that we have a female president. So
But she didn't lose because she was female.
You really believe that?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
I agree with you.
No.
I agree with you entirely.
You agree entirely?
I don't think she lost.
You think her gender had nothing to do with her defeat?
Oh, I don't.
I think Karen tapped into it. People were so desperate for change and Hillary, was just not capable of portraying that. And the first debate she did, when I watched it, I mean, she did a superb job in that debate. She was polished, she was knowledgeable, she was professional, she was everything
She
a
won every
professional Washington
Yes, she did.
politician should be, which was not what
they
the
wanted.
voters wanted. And I think, now, did sex play a part? Like, listen, whether you're male, whether you're female, whether you're pretty, whether you're ugly, whether you're left, whether you're right, that always plays into the voting. But I think at the end of the day, if she'd been a male version of Hillary, whatever that would be, I think she still would have lost to Trump.
I don't agree. I don't agree, because she was forever being criticized, whether it's a pantsuit, no pantsuit, yes pantsuit, of this and that, and also in some way she wasn't able to connect with the voters in the
but that's not a
emotional,
male-female
passionate.
thing.
Oh,
That's
yes,
not
it
a
is. Let me
male-female
tell
thing,
you though,
Olivia.
because to be a successful female, especially the task that she was doing before, you have to have a big armor to protect yourself. So it was very difficult, I think, for her to let go of that armor, to talk about what drives her and what motivates her, what inspires her, what's deep down. People, voters, I don't think felt that. She might have said the words.
She couldn't. There's no question. She didn't connect. She couldn't connect on a personal way
Yes,
that
but-
resonated
But you
with
don't think
people.
that was based
Partially.
in gender?
But partially
actually, I don't
because
think so.
think
I
of
don't
a
think
lot
so.
of the female strong politicians. They survive through being tough emotionally, and it's hard to crack it, because once you have to
But
crack
Olivia,
it,
I mean,
become vulnerable.
I understand, like, the armor. I mean, you make a really good point about the armor, and males need it too. I mean, this is not a game for sissies, right? In politics, but you can still connect. I mean, I knew women politicians who were very steely, and yet were still able to connect. I mean, I used to get called the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove, or in various versions sometimes, and was still able to connect, even though you could still be tough when you had to be tough. So
Karen, you come in on this, Karen.
Yeah, again, Donald Trump took down the entire Republican Party, right? Like he took it down, and there's a lot of men in there, right? Like he ran against all those contenders and he won. He won the ticket. So I don't think you can say he won because he was a male, and that I absolutely agree. If a Republican male had been in that role, they would have lost. They would have lost. They would have lost in the polling numbers, but it would have been less unpredictable, because
But you think Hillary Clinton's gender had no role in her defeat?
I don't think it had any role in her defeat. I don't think she's a good politician. I just don't think she's a good politician. Now, I mean, she's done a great job. She's done remarkable things. But I mean, Donald Trump is not a good politician either. But there's,
well, she really. I mean,
but he represented change like nobody else could.
Yeah.
And that's what the American
Convulsive
people,
change.
convulsive,
Radical
like
change.
burn
Yeah.
down the village to save it change.
Yeah,
That's right.
But I do
Yeah.
want to focus more laser-like on the whole gender issue here.
Yes.
You'll forgive me, because look, I spend a lot of time on social media, and the amount of sexist crap that I saw on social media
Yeah.
against Hillary,
Yeah.
Clinton, that you did not see against Donald Trump, was astonishing. So I want to start, and I want to tap into the experiences that all of you have had, because you've all spent some time in politics, and I'm sure, without even having talked to you much about it in the past, that you've experienced it. So, okay, you want to go with this one first? Board one, let's do this. Caught on video in the audio recording, Rob Ford can clearly be heard talking about opposing mayoral candidate and once political ally Karen Stintz, and you can read the next part there. Ford could clearly be heard saying, how does one even go into work the next day when this is all over the newspapers?
It was awkward. It was quite awkward. And, there was, how do you respond to something like that? And I honestly, I didn't even know how to do it. It was just, it was embarrassing and appalling, and now suddenly that became the story. And every time I was in front of the media, well, has Rob Ford apologized? Will you accept his apology? And so suddenly I'm now wrapped up in this thing that I'm like, I don't even know how I became part of this story.
Well, you had nothing to do with it, really.
Yeah, and so it is, I mean, that was an unfortunate part of, being a woman in politics, because certainly had I been a man, I don't think he would have said that.
well, no, it's also about who has more power, and I don't think a female talking about sex or would have the kind of hurtful power that line has. So the status quo, i.e. power, men can actually hurt woman candidate a lot more using various strategy because of that kind of language.
We heard-
And a lot of, in terms of our language, we don't have that many tools on our toolbox to insult people. Not that we need to or want
Well,
to.
I was going to say, I've never heard a female candidate, use a vulgar sexual metaphor to try to demean a male counterpart.
No, but I mean, again, so this is not, I don't expect that Rob thought that was going to be in the public domain, and again, the media had a choice of whether they wanted to air that, and it was, they could have chosen not to, because he wasn't at a press conference. He didn't say it as part of, he was at a bar, presumably he was drinking, he was talking to a bartender who taped him surreptitiously. So, there was a question for me, like, why is this a story? They had a choice to not make it a story, because
It is a story because if he said it to anyone, it could be about my daughter, anybody, it's outrageous in itself.
it's awkward.
It's
Well,
not awkward.
it's-
I think it's hate. And hate needs to be called out. It's a sexist statement and it's hateful and hurtful, no matter who he's talking about.
But again, I think it was, to your point, I think it was more damaging. I mean, certainly didn't lose the campaign because of that. But in terms of, it was more damaging to me because that story will follow me around. And long after I've left politics. And so for me, it was, that he said it was unfortunate, that it was aired and became a story was really, for me, where the problem lay.
But there's no question that when you're in the political realm, frequently, not always, the criticism of a female, whether it's being done by a male or a female, does tend to be done more in sexual, gender-type terms, right?
We saw the Trump tape during the campaign.
That's right. And CBC Television recently ran a very good story where they had some of the women members of Parliament read some of the things that had been tweeted about them or tweeted to them or
That was
whatever.
very powerful.
Very powerful. And, and the B word, am I allowed to say bitch on TV?
I think you just did.
I think I just
You can't
did.
say the C word.
No,
but,
I can't
but
say
that
the
was
C word.
included as well.
That's right. And and yet when you looked at how they went after Chris Alexander, it wasn't in sexual terms. I mean, he had it was very personal. It was meant to hurt him. It was meant to be demeaning to him, all of those things, but it wasn't done in sexual tones. So there's no question, people go after politicians, male or female, and there is a stream in the body politic that does try to hurt you, demean you, question your motives, like all the time. But with women, it does tend to happen in a sort of sexual gender.
It has a violent sexual connotation to it.
Now it is. Yeah.
Have you experienced any of that?
Nothing. I mean, now my staff may have never showed it to me. And remember, though, too. I mean, I left politics. I lost the election in 2003, and that whole social media universe is very different now. And what it is, in my view, what it is doing is it is taking the shackles off human beings. I mean, there's a reason we have civilization. It's to keep us all under control. And social media
Is the most antisocial form
yeah,
I think I've ever
it gets rid of
experienced.
those controls. So you're seeing raw human beings, if you will. And so, and it's feeding on itself.
John Laschinger, in his book, John Laschinger, who ran your campaign for mayor, did share some awfully distressing stories about the kinds of comments that you got, which were both violent sexually and referred to the fact that you're a visible minority as well. I mean, you got the worst of kind of both worlds in all of that. What kind of an impact does that have?
It didn't hurt me because I've been around for quite a long time, but what it was quite surprising. The intensity of it, that people would descend to that level. And there was a huge number. My staff decided not to show me.
What's a huge number?
I think the first few days, no, hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah, the first few days, especially every time there is a story, then there's just a large wave of it. In retrospect, my staff should have shown more of it to me. I didn't realize it was that bad until much later on. And
Why would it have been valuable to you to know all that?
Then I would have understood the kind of passion that I'm getting people, the kind of hate that I was getting. I didn't realize the extent of it. And I think they were trying to protect me.
And again, why would you want to know that there's a group of people out there who hate you that much?
It's good to know who is your enemy and why. and understand the pain they are feeling. I think often when people lash out, I think it's important that we listen and then find out why they're doing it, what's causing it, what's the intention. Then the next part is, if there is any hope of connecting, you don't necessarily condemn it. Sometimes you do, depends whether that person has a lot of power or not. If that person has a lot of power, then yes, you need to come, at it. But if it is your ordinary people, then you need to think about why are they doing all that? What is deep
Maybe because
inside
they're
them?
racist pigs?
Yes.
Is that
and
possible?
And
sexist pigs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But there's two levels to it, and you're quite right, and that's a really interesting judgment call. Do you or do you not want to know? I mean, I had security because I had death threats at one particular time, and they would never tell me what the details were, but I just knew I had security people around me that I hadn't had around me before. But I think there are people who, understanding, and especially what we saw in the United States, especially what we saw in the U.S. with Brexit, right? There are pressures in the body politic out there that are causing people to lash out, to be incredibly emotional and frustrated and angry about a whole bunch of things that are legitimate policy issues. And that's part of what drove Trump, was that the establishment was not listening, was not responding in people's view to those frustrations. So all it did was, bottle it up, and the top came off the kettle sort of thing. And then there are the sexist, racist pigs.
But I wonder, Karen, whether we love to think of ourselves as a kinder, gentler nation up here. And we like to think that we're not as racist as Americans or sexist as Americans, all those bad things. We like to think so. We're hearing evidence that that may not be the case. Do you have examples?
No, I don't. I mean, just to change the channel slightly in terms of my only tangible experience of being treated differently because I was a woman running for mayor was when I was asked the question repeatedly, well, how are you going to manage with your kids?
A question no man would be asked.
Well, not only
right,
that,
yeah,
I'm like,
that's right,
I
yeah.
said, well, why don't you ask Rob Ford the same question? Because his kids are the same age. And you know what? Last time
Good
I
for you.
checked, I
Good
didn't
answer.
smoke crack.
Good answer.
I mean, I just thought that last part. But, I'm like, oh, my kids? Like, I'm not, how does this even enter the domain of questions about what my fitness to run for office?
Did you get asked that during a debate? During one of the mayoralty candidate debates?
Just during the campaign. Not by a fellow candidate, but by the media.
A journalist.
A journalist asked you that?
Yes. Yeah. And that was the first time I'm like, wow.
Male or female journalist?
A female journalist.
A female journalist asked you that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that was the first realization, wow, I'm in a different game. Because, to your point, politics is not for sissies, right? So I took a different view, because I was, during the whole transit debate, people got quite nasty. And I'm like, okay, well, I only need to know if there's something I should be worried about going to work every day, tell me. But otherwise, I don't need to read that, because I think you guys are kind of not fully facultied. So I don't need to know what you think. But when I realized that I was playing a different game was when people started asking me questions. Journalists started asking me questions about, what about my kids?
I'm not sure that those people that are racist or sexist pigs are necessarily crazy. There are some very fairly normal people that are sexist and racist. Right? So it's not necessarily their mental capacity, it's the amount of hate they have in there, and their worldview, and their ethical behavior.
Yeah. But if they're not willing to sign their name to something, I'm not interested in what they have to say.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's right.
But your answer earlier, Olivia, suggested that you think that even people who say racist, appalling, sexist things, if I'm reading between the lines here, you tell me, it sounded like you said, we need to hear them because they may have a point? Because I need to understand them?
No, they are lashing out because they're hurting. Not that we justified their behavior, absolutely not. Why are they hurting? And what caused them to lash out? What is the cause of the pain? I think it's important for us to know and actually listen to it in some way. So,
if you take, let's go down to the United States again, because it's always safer to go to the United States when you talk about these things, because we're Canadian, don't you know? If you take a middle-aged white male who's lost his job
That's right.
because of whatever reason.
Lives in
And
Michigan.
he's sitting there listening to reports, media studies, whatever, about women aren't getting ahead and women need more help and women that whatever, or we need to be hiring more visible minorities. And he's sitting there trying to get a job, and he's hearing all these messages that, like, in effect, you don't count.
He's seething.
And you've got white privilege, so we don't need to worry about you. You don't have an identity where someone with, so what you start to build by doing, it's almost reverse racism, if you will, in the debate. And so it builds up anger in them. And you're right, it lashes out in a sexist, racist, whatever way. It doesn't make it right, but in that case, trying to figure out how you get at that is important. But there are people, Steve, there's no question, there are people who are just
Hateful.
capital P.
I want to read something here. This is, I had a conversation with a, do I want to identify this person? No, I probably should
no,
not.
no need to.
I had a conversation with let's just say a current female politician who said, politics and media today only seem to allow for two types of female political leaders. You can either be a lapdog or you can be a bitch. And there's nothing in between. Either they expect you to be a doormat, the media is going to walk all over you, the opposition is going to walk all over you, or you are going to be super bitch, in which case they're all going to think that you're, way too ultra tough and way too ultra aggressive and all of that. And there's nothing in the middle. There's sort of no room for just
I don't agree with that.
I don't.
strong,
agree with that.
competent leadership.
I don't agree with
You
that.
disagree?
Yeah, I disagree, absolutely.
How come?
I mean, I think there's no question those are two stereotypes. But I think there's a lot of very talented female politicians in this country and south of the border and around the world. I mean, Angela Merkel is not a bitch. Angela Merkel is not a doormat. Right now, Angela is probably the only sane leader of the free Western world at the moment, right? So I don't agree with that.
You don't think Justin Trudeau's sane?
Just different
Female.
category. Different category.
Okay,
Yes, a
all
different
right,
category.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. How about you, Karen, on that? The two polar opposites and no room for anything in the middle.
That wasn't my experience. Now I'm removed from politics, not that removed, but 2 years removed. That was not my experience. I actually felt, outside of some of when I was running for mayor, I actually felt that women and men, at the municipal level, were they had the same opportunities to make their position, to make their points, and to advance their cause. And so as I say, I can't speak to her experience. I'm sure that's real for her, but for me at the municipal level, I didn't have that.
I don't know about that because, well, yes, those are two stereotypes. But in terms of policy, a female politician supposed to just know about childcare, education, and the caring and the nurturing. The minute you wander into finance, Madam Finance Minister, or military, or
Female defense
policing,
minister. Yeah,
but I don't
defense.
think-
I'm saying it's totally 100% doable. It's countertype, and it shouldn't be, right? You should be gender neutral in believing that your elected representative can do both.
Do you find you're in the business world now, do you find, how would you compare the amount of sexism in the business world to the way it was during your political life?
Well, I think that the political class is seen as a legitimate target by people, literally or figuratively. I think in the business community, it's not quite the same thing. I mean, you're going after your competitor in a different way, and in effect, you're seeing each other as equals, if you will. It's like I'm trying to wipe out, so and so's company, or sell more widgets than so and so's company. It's not quite the same way, because in politics there's sort of the voters, and then there's the political class that, is seen as a target. Quite frankly, is I guess the only way I describe it. So I think it's very different.
I think it is different, but I would say that men excel more than women at networking.
Say that again?
At networking. I think men are
Men-
just better networkers because they're networking when they're golfing, they're networking when they're in business, they're networking when they're on their boards. They're always
It's not
networking.
that they're better, it's just structurally they give them more opportunity for them to network. Women are very good at it.
I think we're not bad at it, but women are busy, right? Like we're busy doing different things that are equally important, but we're not networking in the same way. We're not, and also we're still struggling to kind of find our place at the top so we can build those networks. So it's not. We'll get there, and the future is bright in politics and business for women, but we're still, the reality is women have kids, they take time off, they raise their kids, they make different choices that are equally as legitimate as the ones men make, but you arrive in different places because of the choices that you make.
But if you think about Hillary, when she was the wife and the first lady, she did all this work on health care, right? But right at the beginning, she was expected to change her name to Clinton.
Yes.
That wasn't her name. She was supposed to host tea and be just nice, okay? And just smile and be the spouse.
That was the traditional First Lady's role.
Absolutely, but she forged, she went and studied all the healthcare system around the world, brought in good programs and all that, and they fought her every way, and she had to give up her name, she had to give up, and she did host tea and all that. So the kind of sacrifices that she made was phenomenal. I think most people
But
have forgotten
the mistake,
about all that.
but I think the mistake, because there have been a lot of first ladies who've done a lot of cool things.
Started with Eleanor Roosevelt.
Well, absolutely. But I think what the mistake Hillary made, if I can put it this way, is she in effect was trying to create a role of co-president. And that's where I think the mistake was, because people were electing Bill, they weren't electing Hillary.
Although
And
he said, Janet, 2 for the price of 1.
well, I know he used to say that, but one, that's not the system, and two, that's not what people were voting for. Just the same as if Michelle Obama, was trying to do, leading a whole new sort of policy thing instead of, or Justin's wife, Sophia, was trying to do stuff like that. Yeah, that's not the way our system is, and I think that was the mistake she made. You're right. She ran into the hassle about last name. I mean, I ran into that because I don't have my husband's last name, and we've had some wonderful humorous and not so humorous circumstances, because I didn't have his last name, and one of his proudest possessions is a seat placard that says, that has Derek Ecker on it, and he loves it. Derek Ecker, as opposed to Derek Nelson.
See, my ex wasn't as pleased.
Yeah.
I said Mr. Stintz.
Yeah. No, my husband had a good sense of humor about these things, so he didn't mind being called Mr. Ecker. So, but
As I listen to all these stories, though, it probably, if there are women watching this who are thinking of running for office, they may very well think to themselves, why would I be as nuts as to dip my toe into this pond?
Because
Go ahead.
you get to make a difference in society in a way that very few other positions let you do. You get to touch people's lives. You get to save people's lives. You get to make a difference in a way, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, in a way that you just don't have those opportunities. And that gives a sense of satisfaction that is very tough to get in other jobs.
All true, but is the price too high?
No.
Price is not too high, in spite of everything we've heard tonight?
No, everyone faces different challenges. If you're a man or a woman, where you come from, where your background, or what you bring to the table, everyone's going to face a different challenge. And so women might face some that are different than men, but for sure the men face others that are different than women. And to your point, if you're driven and you want to do something and you want to make a change and you're in politics for the right reason, you will excel. And if you're a woman and you want to do it, you should absolutely do it.
Well, here's the lay of the land today. Sheldon, you want to bring these numbers up? This is what it looks like in politics in this country right now. In the federal parliament, barely over a quarter of the seats are occupied by women. In the provincial parliament, it's a little better. A little over a third of the seats are occupied by women. And on the municipal council in the city of Toronto, the capital city of Ontario, it's a little over a quarter as well. And I guess one would have thought that 100 years after women have been granted the right to vote, which we will celebrate next April, those numbers might be a little bit higher. Why aren't they higher? I'm going to suggest they're not higher because in spite of what everybody says here, there are too many women who are too smart to get into the jobs that you've got because they realize it's a...
No, that's not the only reason.
Okay, what
yes,
else?
that could be one of it, because it's hard for a woman to say that I'm going to jump in. But that's putting aside on the individual side. But what I've seen is structurally is very difficult. So now, New Democrats are different parties that have different policies, that you cannot nominate a candidate until you have searched out female or visible minorities or people of
Well, you had
different
firm quotas, I
capabilities.
think, in place.
We have certain policies that gives women a chance, because in my experience, like I've been elected, not anymore, but for 30 years, I don't regret a minute of it. Yes, I'm old.
Starting as a school board trustee?
That's right.
Then Toronto City Councillor?
And then
Then an MP.
I know it's been a long time. But through those years, I always try to recruit females to run for office.
And how much success did you have doing that?
I have some successes. I can name some of the people, but often I have to ask 2, 3, 4 times over a few years.
Yeah.
Very few would say, yes, I'll do it.
I'm betting
you have
you-
the same experience, right?
I'm betting you were sent out there to recruit for the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, and you got way more no's than you got yeses. Like way more no's, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to put themselves up
That's right.
for this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And how do you convince them, oh yeah, sure, it's worth doing, even though you're going to get called the B word, the C word, and everything in between? Well, I guess there's nothing in between B and C.
You don't convince anyone to run.
But you know what I mean?
You don't convince anyone to run. I think if people have the drive, they're going to find the way. And you're going to, my view is that I support candidates who are going to run, because it is hard, and it's not for sissies, and anyone, my view is anyone who's been in politics or been part of politics should support those that they can, who are the next generation of politicians.
And it's being asked that, I mean, frequently for a lot of women, and when someone says to them, you should run for office, I think plants the seed. And I think that's the first thing, is making sure you're asking qualified, talented women to run and tell them they should run and help support them to run, absolutely.
And then be there to support them.
That's right, absolutely.
Well, I can say the three of you are certainly role models for the next generation that will come up behind you. So congratulations to you for having done it. And you all have emerged relatively unscathed.
We're still standing.
You're still standing.
Still
We're
standing.
sitting at the moment. Thanks so much to Karen Stintz, the former Toronto City Councillor, Olivia Chow, the former Member of Parliament, Janet Ecker, the former Ontario Cabinet Minister and MPP, for this discussion tonight. Many thanks.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.